Howdy, folks. Today we're talking how Google Maps can literally fill your photography calendar, plus the secrets of reviews and websites that actually convert, right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Lutz, and if you're like me and you enjoy free podcasts and YouTube content, you can become a supporter of the show by buying us a coffee over on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us create more exciting episodes for you. But of course, you're more than welcome to say no hard feelings. Just know that your support really does make a difference. And hey, if you haven't already, make sure you sign up to the Camera Shake mailing list over at www.camerashakepodcast.com. We've got some awesome stuff coming up soon, so make sure you get your name down on that list. Now, without further ado, let's give it up, though, for today's special guest, SEO expert, web designer, and host of the podcast formerly known as Shoot to the Top, Sam Hollis. Sam, man, how's it going?
Really good, thanks. How about you?
I'm very well. Now, I said previously formerly known as Shoot to the Top podcast because I hear there's been a bit of a rebrand going on.
We've gone for a rebrand, so we're going to go much more for do what it says on the tin. So we are now Commercial Photographer, your guide to marketing, creativity, and growth.
Fantastic. Now, I've introduced you as an SEO expert and web designer. What brought you to specializing in creating websites and SEO for photographers?
There's a couple of strands to that. One is that being a photographer strand, kind of as an amateur and other little bits and pieces, dipping my toes into the professional world, but not much. And then there's the SEO strand. So from the photography strand, started actually, my father was a professional photographer. He did weddings and stuff. So once I was, teenager and old enough, I was out carrying the reflector, carrying the bags, and eventually doing kind of the casual shots as well. But kind of before they were much, this was, back in the 80s, 90s when, it was all very formal. So it's quite a novel thing back then to do those kind of casual shots up and everybody stood very formally. And the photography I've kind of done on and off since then and dabbled a little bit when I started the web design business in doing bits of photography for clients and things. So that's kind of always been going along. And the SEO side has come in from, I started the web design business back in 2017. And there's a couple of sides to that. One is I've learned as I've gone from the experience. And the other is that I also have a team with me that, some of them are a lot more SEO expert than me. So I've learned a lot from the team and they've taught me a lot. But once you get to the real techie stuff as well, I've got that behind me. So I can talk the ideas and I've got the ideas. And then once it gets down to the real nuts and bolts, I've got some people there who know the nuts and bolts and can really get down to it. And they're the people who are spending hours and hours at it, day in, day out. But from them, I've learned an awful lot about SEO and a lot about photography. And so it's kind of bringing together that passion for photography that I've always had, that, goes way back to when I was carrying the camera bags around and kind of mixing that with the web design work and the SEO work.
What inspired you to start the Shoot to the Top podcast, now known as Commercial Photographer? And how has that influenced, I would say, your perspective on marketing for photographers, or has it had an impact at all?
Yeah, it's had a huge impact, but partly because you're almost analyzing your own knowledge week in, week out, because you're talking so much about it. So just that talking about it just with Marcus kind of develops your own thinking. It's almost like self-reflection. You're talking through it, you're thinking about it. On top of that, we get in amazing guests, which I'm sure you've spoken to quite a few of them. So, you think you know everything, but you think you know a lot, but then there'll be a guest and they'll completely turn your head on a completely topic. You go, whoa, I never thought of it like that. So you can learn so much from the guests coming in and what they share with you and their experience. And some of it, like you say, can be can be just something you're looking at and they're looking at it from a different angle, or something completely left field you've never thought of. And so that constant kind of discussion almost with yourself, with the listeners, the discussion with the guests means, you're constantly learning, constantly needing to learn. So you're sharing new things with guests, and learning from listeners, learning from guests, learning from clients and experience as we go. And in terms of where the podcast came from, I'm trying to remember. Me and Marcus met a long time ago on LinkedIn, and we just kind of started to chat, and we were kind of helping each other and doing a little bit of referrals and that sort of thing. And it just kind of developed from there. And I can't remember, I have to be honest, it's now, I can't remember who made the suggestion first. I think Marcus thinks I did. So maybe I did, but it kind of back in the midst of time. And we just kind of gave it a go, hopped on Zoom and gave it a try.
The thing I love about talking to different, people on the show, and I wonder whether you have the same experience, is that, you often have, especially with certain subjects, you often have opposing viewpoints. 1 week you might be talking to a guest who has this particular viewpoint, and the next week you talk to somebody who has a really quite an opposing viewpoint. And I find that super interesting because it allows me to get a balanced overview over, where the opposing sides are, and it allows me to kind of come to my own conclusion on it.
Definitely. And certainly from the marketing side, we get out with a few topics. We certainly get it with AI, or we've got some photographers going, oh no, we mustn't touch it. It's terrible. Generative AI, the kind of stuff that just helps with processing, is different. Others who are going, I'm really bringing it on board, and it's really part of my work, and it's really essential now. And so that definitely is very polarizing. We get completely different views. The kind of, from the marketing side, it's interesting you get the experts in, because you'll get somebody in who's a LinkedIn expert, and you must get all your clients from LinkedIn, or then somebody who's an ads expert, and you must get everybody from ads. And that's quite interesting to kind of then distill that into your own mix of, okay, what does work for who, and which is the best approach to take.
That's exactly it. You've absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head there. And this is the thing, every time I listen to somebody talk about LinkedIn, I'm thinking, oh my God, I really have to focus on LinkedIn. And then I talk to somebody, about Google ads, and I'm like, oh man, I really have to get into Google ads. And then I talk to somebody about Meta ads. I'm like, oh my God, I've got to do that. And it's one of these things, and all of these things are valuable, as you say. It's about whatever works for you in your specific situation. Now, today we're going to talk about some Google specific things, which is great for me because I don't really know very much about that. Now, I mentioned it in the intro. We're going to talk about Google Maps in particular and the Google Business Profile. Now, why do you think Google Maps and the Google Business Profile are such powerful tools for photographers compared to, let's say, other social media?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things there. First of all, most photographers want to be found in their local area. So, there is a few where they might be based somewhere and they're highly specialized and they go all over the country. But let's be honest, most photographers want to work in their local town, maybe their local county, and a bit further. They don't want to travel across the country. And so on first principles, Google Maps is a place that shows what's happening locally around you. So that kind of maps together nicely as an introduction, as a start. The second thing is the person who's using Google Maps and looking for a photographer sounds stupid, but wants a photographer. Somebody browsing through LinkedIn, browsing through Facebook, 99.99% of them aren't looking for a photographer. I mean, you might manage to capture their attention and you might manage to slowly reel them in, but that is a long process. While the person on Google Maps stood in their house, stood on the high street, typing in photographer because they've decided they want a photo shoot with their family or whatever it is, they want a photographer. They are a warm, hot lead. They're looking for somebody that's going to take their pictures there and then. Nobody is browsing photographers on Google Maps because they're interested in which photographers are near them. They're just,
actually, exactly. And sorry for interrupting you, but this is a really very important point because one of the questions I get a lot is like, okay, what's the difference between Meta advertising, or formerly known as Facebook advertising, and Google ads? And in my head, and based on what you've just said, the thing, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that Facebook ads or Meta ads are great, but they're just ads that pop up in a sense. So if I come across an ad that says, book here for headshots, you think, oh yeah, I need a headshot. So that's a coincidence, so that might work. But with Google Ads, it's really something that somebody's already specifically searching for. So you're already further down the sales funnel, actually, by the time somebody uses the Google machine. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah. And and talking of Google, it's interesting is there's the standard Google search, and then there's the search when you're in Maps itself. But the two are also integrated so that if you do a search in the normal Google search, often a little third of the way down, the Google Map search will appear as a part of that. So what it can also do, Maps is actually quite a good way to get you into the main Google search. Now, sometimes as a photographer, it's relatively easy getting to the main Google search. Sometimes maybe you've got some really good local competition. They've got a really high quality website and you're struggling to get above them. Getting on Maps and moving up can be a way to kind of bypass that and get yourself kind of closer to the top with those local, for those local searches. Or even better, if you can do both and you're top, right near the top of the Maps and search, then that's, then you're away.
So what kind of photographers would benefit most from Google Maps specifically? Is it, let's say wedding, headshot photographers, commercial photographers, or everybody?
Because, there is a categorization system within there, is search within there. The categories for photographers for Google Maps isn't brilliant. They've only got about 5, and there's a lot of categories missing, but that's kind of, you've got that take it or leave it, unfortunately. But beyond commercial, I think if you're a commercial photographer working kind of with larger corporations, they're more going to make direct approach, and you're unlikely that the marketing director in a larger company is just going to look on Google Maps to find their local photographer. But beyond that, for most, if you're, like you said, wedding photographer, portrait photographer, whatever it is, for most other headshots, most of the types of photographers, it is people going to be picking up the phone on their computer, who's near me, who can solve this quickly. And Maps is a tool that a lot of people use for that. So it's for most photographers, I think it's pretty useful.
How does Google decide which photographers make it to the top of that search? Like, how does that?
Sorry, how long's the show? All sorts of things go on. So we can think about the Google search and Google Maps. In terms of the Google search, it brings together a huge amount of things where, we're focusing on maps. And I won't go through all of them now, but basically it looks at your website. It looks at all sorts of content in there. But it also looks at how popular your website is and how many people are linking to it. But it also looks at your wider footprint around the web. So if there's just your website and nothing else, it's going to go, this is a bit iffy. Well, if you've got a LinkedIn profile that's linked to your website and is saying the same things as your website, and you've got a Facebook page that's actively posting and it's giving the same message as your website and got the same logo, and you've got a Google Maps listing and you may be on Yell.com and whatever else, Google brings up this picture. It gradually builds up a picture of you. And the more that's there, the more it's going to help you. And kind of Maps is part of that picture. But why you appear on Maps is slightly different as well. So if you're in Maps and you search for a photographer, there's a few things. And one of the most important things on Maps is location, which obviously you can't determine. You don't know where the person who's searching you or you for, but you can try and be towards the top in certain areas. But location is specific, and you are where you are, if that makes sense. Your office is in the location it's in. We need to come back to that actually, because there's an important thing with location I want to come back to. But in terms of getting your way up the map search, it's basically filling in your profile really well. And there's a load of stuff we can talk about the different parts of the profile and what you need to say. But it's definitely having a good profile and making use of it. Don't just put one sentence for your description. If you're allowed 700 characters, few 700 characters. There is the categorization, so you're allowed primary category and secondary categories. And there is things like photographer as a general, but then there's also some specific types of photographer. And so it depends which you put at the top as to how you appear. Your name is a big factor. So, if you're a headshot photographer, it actually makes a big difference if you call yourself, Fred Block's headshot photographer actually makes a big difference. Some people go for quite flouncy, terms and just in the search, just like we've done with the podcast, where we've gone, right, that's the reason we changed our podcast name for being found within the podcast space. It's just the same. If your name says what it does on the tin, Google will help you with that. Reviews make a huge difference on Google Maps. So, you can ask for reviews and ask customers for reviews. Keep asking them. They don't mind. I know they need reminding. Reviews make a big difference, and posting as well. So, yeah, it's kind of making full use of that profile, really, and keeping it up to date.
Because that's the thing. You've got the Google Business Profile.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me, it's, again, I'm learning a lot from these kind of conversations because, I realize all the mistakes that I'm making. And one of the mistakes that you've already pointed a number of them out. My website is simply myname.com, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe I should call it, I don't know, kirstennutsphotography.com. Maybe that would make more sense,
The domain itself doesn't matter that much. It's the name that you put at the top. That's the key.
Yeah. But the thing that I've always neglected personally is to really treat the Google Business Profile more like a social media, platform, whereby I think I populated it once with some images, and I basically haven't ever looked at it again. What would be your tips as to how do you need to treat that the Google Business Profile, and what are the most common mistakes that people make with regards to that?
Okay. So I guess there's two sides. One is if you're going to do it once, what do you need to do? And then the other is, if you're going to do it regularly, what are those things you need to do? So the regular things to do are get reviews. They are the biggest thing. If you do something simple like search for a wedding photographer in your area, and you'll see the list down the side. It's not quite exact, but it is almost the person with the most reviews is at the top. You're certainly not going to get somebody with one review at the top and someone with 100 below them. So reviews and regular reviews. So if you go mad and 1 month go, I'm going to get all my customers to leave reviews, and then you don't bother for 2 years, that's not as good as Rick, as Google thinks, is this guy going out of business? Regular reviews. So reviews are probably if you're going to do one thing, do reviews, get reviews. And Google, if you've got going to your Google Business Profile, Google give you a link so that people don't have to search for you. You can just literally give them the link, they click on it and can leave you a review. That's the most important thing. The other regular thing is, as a photographer, add some photos. You're a bloody photographer, you should have some. And then post. So you can post on there. And don't spend hours on it. Don't stress. You're never going to get likes. You're never going to get comments. Just copy whatever you've posted on something else and bung it on there. Don't fuss. But first of all, Google notices that you've updated it, tick, you're kind of another tick on the Google's happy with you. And the people who visit see that something was put there a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't put there 6 months ago. So is this guy still going? What happened to him after that last post? As I say, it's not a stress. If you already post on LinkedIn or Facebook, just copy and paste. For a lot of platforms, you need to think about it. Or for that, it's just a case of having, don't just put what your last dinner was, but as long as it's a vaguely relevant business post, bung it on there.
And I'm guessing possibly that's why that's very often neglected, is because you don't get likes and you don't get that feedback. Maybe that's why people just, yeah.
Yeah, you think, why bother? I'm not getting that engagement. Nobody's asking questions on that. But it's still important. But, if you're already posting elsewhere, just remember, every time I do a post on LinkedIn, 1 in 3, just copy, paste, it's 10 seconds. It's not much effort.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the business name has a major impact on it. And I know, and I'm sure a lot of listeners would possibly find that too, is that, once you've sort of decided on your business name, changing that business name can be one of the hardest decisions to make, because you think oh, well, the name's already out there, and so maybe that would have some negative impact in some form, if I change the name of the business now. But how important is the business name to Google in the first place? And secondly, when is it a good idea to change it regardless?
So in terms of how important is it, it's huge. If literally people who are called, Jane Smith, pet photographer, or she's called, Jane Smith, photographer of your furry friends, the pet photographer will definitely do a lot better when people are searching for pet photography. There is no question. It makes a big difference to you, certainly on the map search, less so on it still makes a difference with your website, but less so because there's a lot of content in a website. You know what I mean? A website has a lot for Google to read and get the idea of what you do. So, and it's read all of your, and it's good at reading it. Read all your website. It will kind of, as long as you've written it well, it will know that you're a pet photographer. It'll work that out. So in terms of your website itself, it's not so vital. But in terms of that Google Maps, just being really clear what you do makes a big difference. But then it has to all match up as well. Like I said, Google is also looking at that big picture. So if your website says you've got one name and your Google Maps says you've got a slightly different name, and on Facebook you've got a slightly different name, that's not going to help you. That's almost going to mock you down. It's that if Google sees everything is, the same, your description doesn't have to be word for word the same. But if the descriptions are giving the same impression of what you do, the titles of your business are exactly the same, all of that gives the right impression. And then in terms of changing your name, I think like you're talking about the marketing mix, it depends how old your business is, how many people know you, and where your business is coming from. In some ways, if you've got a lot of repeat business, you're really well established, and, you just get a trickle of new customers and that's all you need, it's probably not so important. While if you're kind of hungry to grow a lot, you want to expand a lot, you're a newish business, then that's the time I think when you're wanting those leads to come in from Maps or from Google search, and that's probably the time to go, then it's worth the change. So I guess, it's a mix of how much you want the business from Google Maps and Google search, and how established you are and how big a disruption that will cause.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. Now, a lot of photographers, for instance, work from home or don't have a studio per se. Like I'm thinking event photographers, for example, things like that. How important is it to set up maps for those type of photographers? Or is there a specific way that they should set up?
Yes, so this is really important. So Google have got much more strict on this recently. So there's two sorts of Google Maps account you can have. You can have the pin. We all know the pin, don't we? The pin in the map. Okay. Now that is you have to think of it, Google does everything for their users. They're not doing Google Maps for you and your business. They're doing Google Maps for the man and woman in the street who want to find a photographer, want to find the nearest hairdresser. So you have to think of everything from their point of view. Yeah. So if you're stood on the street going, where's my nearest photographer? And there's a pin, Google expects that if there's a pin, that person can walk there and they can go in the door and they can speak to you. And in the past, they've been they're not bothered too much if you do it. And lots of people have had it as their house. They're getting more and more fussy about that. And there was a year or so ago, there was evidence that some photographers were reporting other photographers to Google. So they're going, that photographer's got a pin and they've not got a proper office. That photographer's got a pin and getting their competition removed from Maps.
Not unclever, I should say.
A little bit beyond, but yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that approach. But so the theory is, if you have a pin, Google's rules are you must have an office, something which people can go to and got regular opening hours. You must have a fixed notice on the door, so it's not a home. if you've got a studio and you're there, great. Or if you've got an office space, great. But you cannot just put your house in, they won't let you. So if you're getting a new account, they pretty much Google now. It used to just send you a postcard to prove that you were there and job done.
Yeah.
Now it asks for a video where you literally walk to the end of the street and show the street sign, and you walk in and it wants to see you put a key in the door. It wants to see the sign over. It wants, when you go in, to see the camera equipment and stuff. It wants some serious evidence that you are at that location. So yeah, definitely only do location if you've got one. The other sort of account is called a local area account, which is for, like you say, for most photographers are working from home and they serve a local area. And so in that case, you do still Google your address just for kind of official stuff. But in terms of, you then tick a box that says, I'm a local area business. This is, I don't want to send people, it's my home. And then you tell it what area you work in. And the temptation is, I may as well make that area as big as possible because I'll find more people. But actually, the reverse normally works better. If you put a small area, you'll actually get found much, much better in that small area. Or if you put a big area, you kind of won't get found at all.
So you're
definitely.
You're a big fish in a small pond rather than a small fish in a
That's
pond,
it,
yes.
effectively. And not only that, but Google will also doesn't like it either. So it will help you if you're small. And what you can do is kind of, if you're working on your Google Maps, and generally if you're in that small area and you're doing really well, then, maybe expand out a little bit but do it gradually, and then work hard and get found in that slightly bigger area. But if you just go the whole county or something, you're never going to get found.
Because I can see that being an issue for photographers who live maybe in very rural areas, what should those people do? I'm just thinking, I live in the home county of Buckinghamshire. Yeah, because
local service area, you can pick the area, so you don't have to center it around your house. Because all you're saying is, this is the area I serve. That does not have to be the area you live. So you could go, right, okay, let's find the nearest big urban area to me. I'm going to focus it there because that's where other people are.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. I know, especially with Google, a lot of people are trying to game the system, in inverted commas. So using fake addresses, for example, or what's the other thing? What's it called? Keyword stuffing, for example. And I always wonder, what are the downsides of that? What are the potential negatives?
So Google is on this stuff now. So in terms of fake addresses and stuff, like I said, you've got to do, if you have a pin, you've got to do like that video. You can't fake that video. It literally is not allowing you to cut. You have to be at the street sign, walk along, put a key in. It also sends postcards to that physical address to check you're there and stuff. It wants pictures of signs on walls. So you'd struggle to do it. And then, of course, with that sort of thing with the maps, you've got the risk that if they do find out you've scammed the system and you've worked really hard on this account, they can just take it away. And then in terms of the regular site, keyword stuff and stuff, Google is on that. If if you're saying, I'm a wedding photographer in Buckinghamshire, and if you like wedding photographers in Buckinghamshire, then come to my wedding photography. They're on that. You're going to be at the bottom of the search. It's really, the way they read websites now is really clever. Yeah, there used to be people put, let's put a load of white text on a white background of all the stuff I want to get found for. Google knows all that stuff. It's not stupid. It can read your site really well. It knows if you're keyword stuffing it. Nowadays, the SEO is actually about how popular a site is, what it actually says. It's not about, can you scam it? It's nowadays, I'm sure there will always people who will scam the system, but it's getting better and better and better. And generally it's picking up, the websites that actually have got original content, are interesting, people are visiting.
Well, I guess the thing about keywords I've always found is it's a really fine line between the sort of, the realms of keyword stuffing and then just being clever, with using those keywords. So where is that kind of threshold? Like, what's when is too much?
There's some tools to help you, basically. I think the key is, if you're thinking of the first thing is keywords or phrases is do a bit of research and make sure actually people are searching for them. So lots of people come up with a list of, I want to be found for these words. And then they use them. But actually, the first thing to do is go, and you can get this information from Google Ads and a few other services. You can go, is anybody looking for these words? Because there's no point spending ages being found for a term that nobody's looking for. So yes, whenever we help with anyone SEO, we get their ideas of keyword, and then there's lots of websites that kind of help you expand them. There's one called Answer the Public, and effectively, if you put in a couple of words, it will give you all the questions and things people will ask and search for around those words. And then we get 2 pieces of information on them all, and one is how many people are searching for them, because there's no point aiming for stuff that no one's searching for. And 2 is what's the competition like? If you're trying to get found for a phrase that Canon and Nikon are doing really well on, there's no point trying for that. You're not going to compete, let's be honest. So we look at how popular the keywords and phrases are and what is the competition like. Are the other people who are appearing for this, similar size and scale to you, or are they off the scale? You just need to go, come on, mate, try something else.
So, for example, I'm just thinking, take something typical, like, wedding photography, for example, is a good one, or headshot photography, maybe. So if I were, for instance, let's say, if I was a new headshot photographer and I wanted to establish myself in a particular area, and there's already, some competition out there. Let's take the place that I live at, Rickmansworth, right?
Yeah.
The beautiful hamlet of Rickmansworth on the outskirts of West. You know it. Hey.
I used to live not that far from there.
Oh, really? Awesome.
Yeah, I used to be Bovingdon, not far away.
Oh, I actually know it very well. I have clients in Bovingdon. Fantastic. Well, so for all of you guys listening from the other side of the pond, that's quite an achievement to find somebody. The only famous person to come from Rickmansworth, I believe, was William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania. For those of you across the pond, there you go. There's also a pub called the William Penn. As any decent British town must have a pub named after the most famous person from that particular town. Yeah. So clearly, okay. So let's say I'm a new headshot photographer in Rickmansworth, and I realize there's already some competition out there. Now, the logical conclusion would be that I would think, well, okay, so these people must be, they must be using keywords or key phrases like headshot photographer in Rickmansworth, for example. Now, what could I do to differentiate myself from those already established businesses in this sort of instance? And the same thing be true for wedding photographers, for example, if you're trying to establish yourself.
Yeah, of course. So, there's a few things. The one is to look at how well they are doing. So look at their Google Maps, look at their website, look at where else they're listed, and kind of gauge a quality. You look at the website and go, is this really quite a large website with quite a lot of blogs, with quite a lot of information that's really well established with a lot of visitors? You can't really tell the visitors, but you can kind of judge the quality of a website, because we have to be honest, if we're looking at photographers' websites, there is quite a range in quality, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So, have a look, because sometimes it can appear that these big, mighty things, but actually it wouldn't be that hard to move above them. But let's say, so there's kind of 2 options. One is do effectively competition assessment. Are they really that big and that hard to get against? Or actually, once you've built a decent website, got a good Google Maps profile, could you fairly quickly move above them? So there's that first option of, are they actually that good? But it could be, you're right, they've been there a long time. They've literally got 250 reviews on Google Maps. They've got a blog of every wedding they've ever done, and they've done hundreds, and you're going to struggle to get ahead of them. Then the thing that I think then is always, so what's the alternative approach? How else am I going to get it? Maybe these guys are not on TikTok and I need to get on TikTok. Maybe they're doing nothing on video. And if I get a really good YouTube channel going, videos appear in the Google search. So although they're top of Google, it could be that they're top and next comes 3 of my videos. And I've, by circumnavigating and finding a different route, I'm suddenly there. Or maybe their website's brilliant and their maps listing's terrible, so I'll focus on the maps, or vice versa. So yeah, those, I think, definitely quality assessment, because sometimes it actually isn't as hard as it seems. But if the kind of quality is there and it's going to be hard to compete, then what are your other routes in?
Now, you mentioned reviews, and I've always wondered that, like, how important are reviews actually for your ranking on Google? So you sort of mentioned a little bit earlier that the more reviews you have, the higher you rank. Is that always true?
On maps, it's not an exact correlation, because it might be you've not posted for 6 years, but you've got quite a lot of reviews, or it might be a description of your business is one word. But all other things being equal, it definitely, you would definitely be ahead with more reviews. And even without things being equal, I think Google, I mean, nobody ever knows the exact science of this. It's all hidden. But, to me, the reviews are probably the things, if you do nothing else, focus on the reviews. That is the biggest, I think it's almost Google's way of saying, yeah, this guy is real. It's other people saying things about them. That's like, your website's great, but you've said all that about yourself. A Google review is somebody else is saying it about you. Okay, one or two might, you go. But if there's a lot, they are probably genuine. So, yeah, I think it's that external verification, and Google definitely seems to like those more reviews, regular reviews. That's definitely, if you take nothing else from this, that would be the one thing to do to me. If you do nothing else with Google Maps, is get those reviews.
And of course, reviews are comparatively easy to get. I mean, I've for years now, I've made it sort of a standard thing. Whenever I deliver images, for example, as part of my standard email is always a request for reviews, and I guess, about 50% would leave a review, and then I will email them back after a few weeks to say, hey, by the way, how about a review? And usually that bears some fruit.
Definitely. And some people worry about that chase up, and I don't think people mind at all. Most people are more than happy to leave review, and most people, when you ask them, will say, oh, yeah, I'll do that, and will forget. And they are not bothered at all if you just go, oh, mate, say you do a review, would you mind doing it? Because lots of people go, oh, I'm chasing. They don't mind. They know. They want to help you. They're just forgotten. They're busy, like you are. Just, okay, after, 3 times, 4 times, maybe then call it a day. But, chasing up 2, 3, 4 times, people don't mind. They do genuinely want to leave review, and they have just forgotten.
I always wonder, when it comes to reviews, because you get these different types of reviews. Like sometimes you get these one-word reviews, it's just said, great. And then other times you have like, it's half a novel. So from Google's perspective, does it make any difference? Is it just a numbers game, or does Google look at let's say, the quality
of... look at the reviews as well. Yeah, it's kind of, but the ones that are just good or just stars will not give as much as the others, but it's a mix. If you've got 100 that say very little or 2 that say a lot, you're probably still in the 100, you're going to be ahead. But yeah, if you can persuade somebody to write a couple of sentences for you, great. I think one of the things to do is suggest things you want people to say. And I don't mean write a review for them, but sometimes people are actually saying, that's lovely, I don't know what to say. So, if you're stuck for things to say, maybe you could talk about what it was like on the day of the shoot. Maybe you could talk about, whatever it is you want them to, just give them a bit of a prompt, because it helps them. Because often they're thinking, I'd really like to, help Kirsten, the photography shoot we did was great. Oh, what do I say? Well, if you just go, could you write a couple of sentences about how you felt on the day? And suddenly they're more likely to leave review because they actually know what to write, rather than going, because that's one reason people don't review sometimes, is they're just thinking, I don't know what to say.
Does it make a difference when people mention, let's say, the location or the type of service from a keyword perspective?
Yeah, it can do from a keyword. Again, it's all part of the search. So yes, if they're mentioning location, if they're mentioning services, so yeah, you could say, would you mind, mentioning say wedding photographer, would you mind mentioning a wedding venue? That would really help me. And that can definitely help with that.
Do you have a particular strategy when it comes to getting authentic reviews from clients without? Because I think, as you mentioned, a lot of the time, I think people might think like, I don't want to pester my clients. It might be annoying. Like, what would you suggest? What's a good strategy to follow?
I do the same as you. I think the key is system. The key is, in some ways, it doesn't matter what you do, but don't do the, oh yeah, I'll try and remember, because you won't. Like you said, when you deliver the photos, that the email that delivers them says at the same time, would you leave a review? Or when people become a client, they go on an automated email list, and I know that 3 emails in, they're going to be asked for reviews, and 6 emails in, they're going to be asked for a reminder. I think it doesn't matter too much what it is, as long, it might be that you call them and you ask, but the key is you have a system that you use. The casual, oh yeah, I'll do it, you won't do it.
How did you respond to negative review, and what kind of impact does that have? Like, I actually, to be honest with you, I've only ever had really good reviews, and I don't know how I don't actually know how I would feel about a negative review, and how I would respond to that. What's the done thing?
It's difficult. So there's a few things. One is, is it genuine? So you do get people who just leave you negative reviews who have never used your service, which is annoying. And you can report them to Google, but anything you report to Google, do not expect them to be jumping up and down the next day or maybe the next week or next month. It's not it is not quick. And obviously there is also then people who are aggrieved. And I think it's then down to perception. It's then down to, you responding in the most positive way. And it depends what they're saying as well. If they're saying something that you 100% disagree with, because they're saying, you said you'd do this and you didn't, and you're going, well, actually, you paid for this, mate, and then you wanted this. I think then you have to respond in a polite way and say, look, we did agree this and we did this for you, but you wanted something extra. Yeah, I think you just have to explain it. But it might just be that they had a genuine grievance and going, I did mess that one up. And I think then you just have to go, look, we're really sorry. We didn't do as well as we could. And it's as much then thinking about, actually, when other people read this, what are they going to think of you? And if you come back aggressive and argumentative, they're not going to think, highly of you. But if it was genuinely something where you think this is unfair, come back politely, but with a polite response. But the issue is then you don't want to get into it in the review, lots of comment and response. That's the last thing you want.
Yeah.
So it's a balance.
Because you can't actually turn those negative reviews off like you can on YouTube, for example, when you get a negative comment.
No, that's it. So the other thing you have to think about is what's your star rating then? Because you did have 5 stars and now you've got a 2-star review. And the only way to deal with that is to water it down, is to go, right, I've got to work really hard but to get all of my other clients to leave me reviews, because if I've got 100 reviews that are 5 stars and 1 star, 1 2-star, nobody minds. Everybody realizes that happens. But if I've got 4 5-star reviews and 1 2-star review, that doesn't look so good.
Have you seen any examples of photographers, for instance, where, really focusing on reviews on Google has made a huge difference to their bookings?
I can't think of any specific examples off the top of my head, but it's more when you just look at the numbers, just do a search and you can just see, the ones with the reviews are at the top. It's that simple. And it does move you up there.
Sometimes I've heard these comments where people have said, like, oh, if you have a straight 5-star rating, that's not actually as good as having like a 4.5-star rating, because maybe it makes it more genuine that way. Is there any truth in that, or would you say like, I'll screw that and just go for all out of that?
No, I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of that. They do have your individual accounts, and if you've got endless 5-star reviews that are very vanilla, and it's a bit possible that they didn't really use your service, maybe. But beyond that, if you're clear that they're people who've used you, and for photographers, people can see that. If people are a bit, they can literally go to that person's website and probably there's your photos. It's kind of obvious that you've helped them, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I don't think that's a huge issue. Don't go around searching for 2-star reviews and you get 4.5 instead of 5-star.
Well, that's the thing. I'm glad you said that. I want to talk a little bit about websites. In your experience, why do so many photographers' websites fail to convert views into bookings?
There's a lot of reasons and there's a lot of websites. I think one of the issues I find is that if you go to the very top of the photography profession, the people who are really famous. So let's say I go to Martin Parr's website. You've heard of him. He's like very famous photographer. His website is just photographs. And if I go to other photographers that are absolutely at the top of their game, they are household names within the industry. They, have people knocking at their doors to work with them, and they have agents. So they're not actually getting work for themselves. They've got agents doing the work. Their websites are just photographs. And lots of people in the industry see that and they go, well, that's what my website must like. It must just be photographs. That's what those top echelons of the photography industry are doing. That's what I should be doing. But for most photographers, it's a bloody terrible idea, because there is zero written content. So you will never be found on Google because Google doesn't know what the hell you do. So there's that side of it. And people looking at the website don't know what you do. Let's be honest, the average man on the street, woman on the street cannot tell the difference between most professional photographers. 95% of professional photographers are good photographers. There's always the odd exception we go. Okay. But for most photographers you go to, their photographs are good. So we're showing lots of nice photographs. I'm going to go to the next website and it showed lots of nice photographs. I'm going to go to the next website. What's going to engage people and convert people is you talking about the service as a whole, how people felt, when you did their web headshot. Were they like petrified because they hate having the photograph taken, or did you make them relax? What was the process like afterwards? Did you get the photos back quickly? Were they in lots of helpful formats? Did you send them extra stuff, a special one just for their LinkedIn profile to help them out? All about the service, the feelings, what you're offering, which you cannot get all of that from looking at the photograph. A picture of the mother of the bride does not tell the whole story of how much you helped beforehand, how you actually put them in touch with a florist and somebody who could make nice cakes, how afterwards, everything was ready the moment they got back from their honeymoon. That's a story that needs to be told with text. And I think a combination of photographers, being photographers, so they want to put photographs everywhere, and those top echelons websites just being photographs mean that one of the biggest thing is there's no content on an awful lot of photographers' websites, and you need the written content.
I think that's generally one of the common mistakes where you look at the websites of some of your idols and you kind of go, okay, well, they're doing this, so therefore this must be this must be the way you do it. But actually, you're right. It's a little bit like I always compare it to podcasting, actually. And we're both in the same boat when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But it's often, especially with my younger daughters, we have a conversation, and we're like, oh, so and so, insert name of super mega global mega star, has her own podcast now. It's like, okay, well, that's great. Oh yeah, she's got like 552 billion listeners. And you go, well, that's all. That's well and good, but they were famous or very well known before they started the podcast.
Their name is what sold it. Yeah,
exactly right.
You as a photographer, your name isn't going to sell it.
It's exactly right. But when Joe Bloggs or Kirsten Nuts, starts a podcast, originally, nobody's going to listen to it. Not even my dog listened to it for a long time. Now he's forced to. Now he doesn't have a choice. But that's the thing. So people find you in different ways, over time, usually very slowly. But if you have found this podcast, make sure you head over to www.camerashakepodcast.com and sign up to our brand new mailing list, because we've got a whole bunch of super awesome stuff coming. So the news, there's going to be some great news about that very soon. So make sure you get your name on that list, because stuff's happening. Just head over to the website, sign up to the newsletter, put your name on there. You'll love it. Anyway, after this little commercial break, let's carry on.
But actually, we'll mention that because some photographers do that. Get my newsletter. Now, for a podcast, yes, I want to listen to the next episode. Do I want to be on my photographer's newsletter list? No, frankly, it's not. Do I want to be on my dentist? Definitely not.
Oh, man.
It depends who you are. Actually, one of my clients is a musician, and just say be on my mailing list. I'll send you my next gigs. People want that. It's not so exciting to be on the photographer's mailing list.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And, especially when you're a wedding photographer, because, why would you be in a mailing list? Because maybe are you reconsidering? Are you planning on getting married again? I don't know. How many times could you possibly get married?
The only thing you could do with a wedding one is what you can do is make it actually a really good one, but make it seasonal. So you try and get everybody on at like January, February, and then it's a really, really good series of stuff leading up to the wedding. You could do, but
yeah. Or you could say like
the next year.
Yeah. Or you could say to your couples, did you know that I'm also doing divorce photography? So make sure you head over to my mailing list. Sign up now for a special discount. If you get divorced in under 12 months, I'll give you the first, some extra photos for free or something. I don't know.
That's it. The other thing actually with with the websites, there's one more thing that lots of photographers do. So most photographers have packages, don't they? You know, you're a headshot photographer, 100 quid package, 500 quid package, whatever it is, brand photographer, wedding, they have packages. Now, most photographers make the mistake that what they do on their website is they talk about what the package includes. You get 53 photographs. I am there for 2.5 hours. You will get this at the end. I will send them back. Nobody cares. People buy off emotion, not off fact lists. You know, if you're a wedding photographer, how do you make the bride feel on the day? How did everybody feel with you being there, part of their party as a stranger? Did they enjoy that? Did you make them feel special? Did you completely fluff up their day because you made them sit for 6 hours in the rain to get the right shot? Or was it a very different experience? And getting across that experience and that emotion, what you get from a wedding photographer isn't 34.3 photos and 2.5 hours of time before the service. What you get is an amazing memory. What you get is at the end, this book of memories. That's what you get. You get that emotional thing. Nobody cares about the nip. Yeah. But that's what all the photographers do. It's almost universal. Their packages, they just go, you get this, you get this, you get this. You're a brand photographer. You don't get 63 images for LinkedIn. You get an amazing way to grow your business. Yeah. That's what you get.
That's it. Sell on benefits, not on features, as they say.
That's it. And they always, 99% of photographers' websites I review, they're just doing the features. You know, what are the boring list of things?
Yeah, I think it's a common mistake. You know, and the whole
industries.
You know, the whole package idea. You know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I always think. I do believe when it comes to pricing, it's worth experimenting a little bit and, you know, trying out different things. And certain things work for a certain time, and then, you know, a certain time or a certain place, and then it's good to switch things up once in a while. You know, I've certainly found in my business that's definitely made a difference.
I found one thing with packages is even if you sell them to nobody, if you have a couple on your website, it gives people a ballpark idea of costs. Something like photography, they can come along. And it is, the price range is a huge up. They say they come along and they kind of have no clue if a photo shoot from you is £100, £1,000, £10,000. And, you know, there is that kind of price range. And so what I find is even if you sell nobody a package, just having a couple, so they've got a clue as to your, you know, roughly what scale of cost they're talking.
That's absolutely true. And, you know, that works in a lot of situations. That works really well. And especially if you live in, you know, maybe a rural area or, you know, somewhere, maybe in a suburban area, for example. The opposite can also work really well, especially if you're, you know, in a place, if you're in a big city, for example, and you really want to niche down on your audience. What I found is that you can use pricing to really be very selective when it comes to your audience. If, you know, for example, if, you know, a good example would be a friend of mine, Ivan Weiss, is a headshot photographer in London. You know, he doesn't do packages. He just does one price. That is it. I think it's 500 quid per session right now, plus per photo fee. And it's comparatively expensive, you know. But he is after a particular type of customer, and he's in a city surrounded by 18 million people. So, you know, there'd be plenty of fish in the sea that will specifically go for this very, very specific offer. So in his particular case, he doesn't have to, you know, throw out a net. He can sort of precision fish with a very particular type of bait. I know nothing about fishing, by the way. I'm just making this up.
That's the other thing that some photographers do as well. They worry about niching, and so their website is kind of a mess of portrait, weddings, commercial, and it's just like, what do you do? Yeah, just niche. And then
yeah, exactly. And then of course the opposite is true. If you're, you know, now always, because this is like one of the things I find especially on this podcast, very often there's this sort of debate between, well, should you niche down, should you cast your web wide? I think there are a number of different what's the word? There's a number of different factors that play a role there. One is where you live. You know, do you live in a rural area where, like, for instance, if you live like outside in somewhere in rural Buckinghamshire or something, or in like the Yorkshire Dales, you know, good luck only doing headshots, because unless you're taking headshots of sheep and cows, you're not really going to get, you know, there's no people there, you know. But for instance, if you're going to have to be more or less a jack of all trades. You're going to have to do some events and some birthday parties.
Yeah, or go slightly wide. Yeah, you've got to work out where your audience is, don't you? Or go for a wider geographical area. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. But if you're in a big city, yeah, you can totally niche down. And of course, the other thing is what I've found very specifically over the last few years is that the performance of the economy plays a massive role in who your clients are, and what you have to do to keep your business, running. So I found that, for instance, since the pandemic, things have changed. If you look at, for instance, in my particular case, if I look at how my business is performing now and what clients I attract compared to, let's say, 5 years ago, there's definitely been a shift.
Just going back to where you are, again, if you're though in this rural area in rural Buckinghamshire, in the Yorkshire Dales, in some ways you're niching anyway, you're geographically niching. So, because I think the key is you talk to a particular audience. So yes, if you're a headshot photographer, you can talk very specifically a headshot photographer. But if you're a generic photographer, but in a very specific location, you can still almost a niche. That is still a niche. You're still talking to people in that specific area about local issues, about local things you can do. I think the worst thing is if you haven't really got a geographical area or a specific area of photography, because then all of your marketing kind of is just speaking. When you're speaking to nobody listens. Well, if you're speaking to people in the Yorkshire Dales, if you're speaking to people in the Yorkshire Dales, you've got a very specific group of people there, and you might be talking about their weddings, and you might be talking about their businesses, but you can talk about the local area, you can talk about local things in the news, you can talk about, local themes and local places, and people are listening. You're still talking to an audience. You've got somebody in mind. While if you just go, I can help you with photography, nobody's listening.
I think that's actually super important. I think you want to become, part of, especially if your business is local. And so this is actually one of the things where, my business has changed dramatically compared to pre-pandemic. I've talked about it many times. Just in a nutshell, before the pandemic, all of my clients, 100% of my clients were international corporates. It really didn't make any difference where I lived at all. With the pandemic, that changed dramatically. And now a lot of my clients are local businesses. The reason why that is, that was a very conscious shift on my behalf, because I realized with the pandemic that, when something like a pandemic happened and wipes out the entire conference industry, then, you all of a sudden you realize, I've built my entire business just on one pillar and that's it. Something comes along and wipes that particular thing out, you're screwed. And so, I sort of figured, well, I got to be clever here and actually sort of diversify in some ways, so that in the event there's another pandemic around the corner or whatever, that I have other pillars to prop up my business, and I can shift, a little bit. But working with local businesses, I found is really very different from dealing with international corporates. All of a sudden, being part of the community becomes a lot more important. Being part of the business community and building these relationships, because that's another thing I've realized is that working with smaller businesses or with local businesses, it's about building relationships. With corporates, that's a completely different ballgame.
So it's still a building relationship with the right people in the corporates, isn't it?
Sure.
There's still who is your contact, there's that relation. But it's very different to building a relationship in a local business community.
And the other thing I've noticed with international corporates is that, let's say, for instance, the people that would book me back in the day were predominantly people in the marketing department, usually.
Yeah.
And, and in the corporate world, people tend to shift from one job into another job, And so what would happen would be somebody would move from one company to another company, and now they'll be at the new company and they would have to book a photographer. And so automatically they would come back to you because you were their contact. But what would happen would be there'd be a new guy at the old company and they now have their own contacts, and then you sort of almost lose that deal because they, And so it'd be like
the person and the business, they've all got their own little black book.
Yes, exactly right. So that was really something I figured relatively early on. So I always tried to, in a weird way, cast my net a little bit wider within that corporation, so that I
So then their deputy knows who you are, and other people within there knew who you were.
Exactly. With smaller businesses, that's very different. It's like once you make connections with them and you and you what's the word? You develop these, and work on those contacts, then it just becomes a natural thing, where that person goes, oh, well, I need a photographer for this or that. We're going to call, Kirsten or James or Steve or whatever other name I can think of, Now, what's this sort of balance? I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Of course, we talked about websites that have nothing but photos on them. And because of the lack of SEO, it'd be extremely difficult to be found just on the strength of photos alone. But where's that balance between being too wordy and having too much text on there? Because the flip side of that argument is that people say, well, nobody reads any text on a website. So where is that? What is that balance, that perfect balance?
Yeah, so that's always a difficult one. You do need texts on the website. So it's got to be kind of, in terms of space, it could be more photos than text, but you've still got to have, a good chunk of text. You need to explain what you do. Even if there's always a balance with the text in that who are you writing it for, Google or the people reading the website? And it's a bit of both to some extent. So you've got to explain to Google what the hell you do. And you need a good few pages to do that. And some people do read. So some people skim and jump, and other people love the detail. So in some ways, kind of my thought of kind of the way the website works is, first of all, you need a few pages. And then for me, the home page is about grabbing people's attention and getting them to the right place, getting to the right page. So it might be that they're going to your head shop deal. It might be that they're going to your free download page. It might be that they're going to your wedding page, whatever it is. But you're kind of trying to grab their attention and get them to the right place. And then websites are all about really call to actions. What do you want people to do before they leave? Because if they do nothing before you leave, what was the point of the whole thing? You want them to, whatever it is, get your free download, book a call, send you an email, whatever. And so it's about trying to persuade them to do that. And so I think you're right, some people like the details and don't. So I think it works almost like how they write news. So, if you read a newspaper article, actually you get the whole thing in the first paragraph, but then it goes into more details. That kind of same thing applies, try and get the core details at the top quite quickly, but then a bit further down, come back to it again and give a bit more information, a bit more detail. And then do that for a few topics, and then maybe further down give even more detail. So kind of for those that want the detail, it's there, and for Google, it's there. And for those that kind of with a quick attention span, the quick headline grabbing stuff's there at the top for them. So yeah, it's a bit of a mix, and it's always that, how much is this for Google? How much is this for people? And it's always got to be a bit of a mix. It's got to work for the people reading it, but it's got to be enough information for Google. The websites at the top of Google, you always have 1,000, 1,500 words of text per page at least. And that's quite a lot of text.
Isn't it a good idea? Because I know, for a lot of photographers, for instance, a lot of photographers might be confident in taking pictures, but when it comes to writing text, it's a different story. Is it a good idea to use tools like ChatGPT, for instance, to create that web copy for you, or does Google figure that out? Is that
everybody's using it, so I don't think it's a huge issue. I think there's a few things. I think just go in Google, right? ChatGPT, write me a website with very little prompts is definitely not a good thing. My suggestion, to be honest, is to use it for ideas. So a lot of people I'm not sure for what to write about. I'm not sure how to structure it. So my suggestion is usually use it for ideas, and the more prompts you give AI, the better. So if you can give 2 paragraphs of description about who your audience is, where you are, what you do, what you like, blah, 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 the more information you give, the better it gets. And go, right, could you give me a suggested structure for a 5-page website? Then it does a brilliant job of that. My suggestion is then you go away and do some of the writing yourself. If you're not that confident, just do it and then feed it back into ChatGPT for help and improvements. But I think going the whole way through with ChatGPT, it ends up a bit generic. It does get spotted by people a bit and by Google. While if you're kind of more, some people know the ideas and then they write it and feed it into ChatGPT just for improvements. When you're doing that, it's your writing with improvement. It's not the same as just created from scratch. And I think that makes quite a big difference. It's got your voice in there, even if they've kind of, improved your grammar and given you some more ideas. So yeah, I think use it for helps, but that pure generate it 100%, I don't think is a good plan.
I think it's always a giveaway when the last paragraph starts with "furthermore."
Yeah, there's a few things. There's little dashes. There's a few things that kind of, when you use it a lot, you realize that, that it's
see the dash thing is a funny thing because I naturally use a lot of dashes. This is like how my brain works. I've always done it. It's like a stereotypical thing for me, But I know that in the past when I've written things, and I use my wife as my editor essentially.
She's your chat GPT.
Yeah. So traditionally, so what would happen would be, I often write articles for, let's say, magazines and things, and because English isn't my native language, I always have certain hang-ups about.
There'll always be a certain thing, won't you, that will just to a native person not seem quite right.
Exactly. So, and I always, I'm always very conscious of that, and so I always, and my wife's an English major, so I always have her proofread, my waffling basically, and I have a very different personal style of writing from my wife. So I'm very colloquial. I basically write very similar to the way I speak. It's it's more casual, let's say. My wife, she's very official. Any letter of complaint to any company, my wife's perfect. She's got that nailed 100%. I could never. I've never met anybody who's that amazing at complaining. It's brilliant, But I remember in the beginning, she would proofread my my writing, and she would go like, "Oh, you can't say that." Because I'd be like, "Well, but I want to say it like that," because that's to me.
So that balance, isn't it, between help and changing your style?
Yeah, exactly right. And so over time, she sort of learned what my personal style is, and so she's now learned to edit or to proofread in my voice almost, and so she can pinpoint when something deviates from that. And I find with ChatGPT in particular, it's actually interesting because you can feed stuff into it, and it'll learn your own way of saying.
I found that. I was going to say So if you write a lot of vlogs, and say you've got a new blog and you've written it and you want some help, you can go, these are my previous 2 blogs, I'm giving you this for style because I want to make sure it keeps in the same style. And simple as that.
And that's another thing I was going to ask you, because when it comes to blogs, I often hear these conflicting beliefs or attitudes. Some people say write as many blogs as possible because it gets in all the SEO and it's great for search engine optimization and this and that and the other. And other people say, blogs are dead, it's a waste of time, don't do it, blah, blah, blah. Are blogs, and let's say, for instance, for photographers, case studies could be another good example.
Yeah.
Is there really still a lot of value in focusing your time on writing blogs?
It depends. Like with everything in marketing, depends what you want to. If you want your website to be found in the Google search and that's part of your marketing strategy, then yes. I mean, basically, a blog is just another, in the end of the day, is another page of your website. And the more pages you have on your website, giving Google more information about what you do and where you work and who your target audience are, then the more it's going to help you get found in the search. It's as simple as that. Now, some people's blogs, I have to be honest, are not going to help because some people, they can't quite work out to do the blogs, or they talk about what they did that month and they took their dog to the vet, and they're talking about dog visiting. They took their dog to the vet and their daughter did this, and they did a photo shoot. That's not going to help your SEO. But if you're, say, a wedding photographer, and yes, you decide I'm going to do a blog about wedding venues, and you have every single one is about a different wedding venue, and you review it and you talk about what weddings are like there and how to contact people and blah, blah, blah. There, and obviously you're talking about wedding photography too, and you're putting lots of your wedding photos in there, then that's brilliant for your SEO. It's all linked. It's all linked. It's all helping you get found. So so there's a couple of things, I guess, for a blog. One is the SEO, and it does make, as long as it's on a coherent topic that's relevant and they're kind of well written, then yes, it definitely helps. The only thing with keywords is your own pages can compete with each other. So if you're thinking about keywords, try and do one blog about one particular keyword. Don't think I'll do all 5 blogs about this one keyword. That's bad. Just kind of, this one's about that one and that one's about that one. But the other thing is also, it depends on your other marketing. It might be that you have a big newsletter list and you send a lot of newsletters, and then you need some content for that. And so blogs are perfect for that too. The other thing, again, blogs, it's also a way to move people from social to your website, because social media is great, but having 500,000 million followers on Facebook, unless they do something, is pretty useless. So a blog is a way of kind of tempting them to move from that social media space onto your website, where you can start to bring them in a bit more to your sales funnel. So no, I 100% don't think blogs are dead. Yeah. But same as everything, everyone should have a marketing plan, hopefully on paper, and it might even be in here. But in my head, sorry, not everyone's watching the video. You know, if your entire marketing strategy isn't around local networking and all of your results come from that, then yeah, you don't bother blogging. But if you want to get found on Google and you're trying to engage people in social media and bring them in, then it's amazing.
Now, I think a lot of people who would have been listening to this episode up to this point will all of a sudden have realized that, yeah, man, coming to think of it, there's a lot of stuff wrong with my own website. Now, I could either go and completely redesign it from scratch. And I wonder what the dangers are with that, or are there any downsides? If I went, okay, well, I'm gonna redo my whole website. Is that going to have an impact on my, searchability initially?
So the first thing is, it depends if you've built up any searchability. So the first thing is, hook your website up to Google Analytics and to Google Search Console. They are completely free services. Google Analytics tells you who's visited your website, what pages they go to, what they do when they're there, and where they came from. Did they come, and they do geographical, so did they come from the Google search? Did they come from your newsletter? Did they just type in your web address? Yeah. So that's the first thing. So you can go and look at that. Now, if you aren't getting many people coming from the Google search to your website, then it makes absolutely no difference. Don't worry about how you're doing in the Google search, because you're doing terribly. So it makes no difference to you to rebuild the website, the Google search, because you had nothing to start with. But got lots of people do that. They worry about all this search. You're not being found anyway, mate. But
yes, it doesn't make any
difference. Look at that. It makes no difference at all. Do whatever you like. But if you look and you go, oh, actually, I've got a few hundred people every month coming to my website, especially at that blog, then you need to, yes, if you're going to rebuild your website, you need to do it much more carefully. And one of the main things is effectively to maintain the URL structure. So effectively, every page on your old website maps across to a page on the new website, and ideally has exactly the same link. So, it might be /services, /headshots, whatever it is. But you have the easiest way to do it is just maintain those. So every single page on your old website maps across to the new website, and it's talking about similar things. Now, it might be that it does it in a very different way. The style's completely different. There's lots more text, whatever it is, and there's lots more pages. So it doesn't matter adding more, but the key is the pages on your old one, don't lose them as they move across.
Are there any quick fixes? So if somebody's not ready to pull the trigger on like a complete redesign yet, are there any quick fixes that somebody can do that will sort of enhance their searchability pretty much right off of the bat?
So in terms of searchability, it's usually about content. It's like we talked earlier, knowing your keywords, doing the research so you know what you're aiming for. And then it's, a case of, am I actually talking about these? Have I got enough written content on my page? Searchability. The other thing with searchability is, unfortunately, Google looks at your website, and if there's no visitors or very few visitors, it goes, nobody's visiting your website, therefore it's probably rubbish, so I'm not going to send anyone else, which is kind of a bit of a vicious cycle, isn't it? Well, when you've got lots of visitors, Google goes, this is a popular website, I'll keep sending more. So then one of the things you can do is actually go, right, how am I going to get visitors to my website? Maybe I need to spend a lot of time on social media pushing people to my website, or a lot of time on email marketing, pushing people to my website, or even buy some Google ads to push people to my website. So Google sees that it's popular, and then that will help me in the long term in terms of SEO, because Google will see my site as popular, will send more people. And then once that builds, I can kind of scale back on the ads and scale back on the social, because I've then got lots of visitors coming to my site from the Google search naturally, because it's built up. But you do have that problem. If you don't have visitors to your site, Google isn't going to send any more.
I'm always wondering if, when you have very specific landing pages for particular things, let's say you run like a Google Ads campaign, and let's say you have landing pages that are not necessarily linked to your menu structure in your main website. Does that still add to your SEO, or is that completely separate?
That does, as long as you don't tell it to be. So you can effectively on most website builders press a button and say, don't include this in the search. But I wouldn't do that unless, this is a side hustle and it's absolutely nothing to do with your main business. As long as it's to do with your main business, it goes into the search, it's fine. It helps. It's talking about your services. It's no problem at all. The other thing, actually thinking about it, if you want to get higher in the search, is like you said, it's not just on your website. Look at yourself around the web. Is your LinkedIn profile got the name of your business? Has it got your website? Has it got your right email address? Is the description of your business, give or take, the same as the one on, so it doesn't be word to word, but it's giving the same impression of the services you do as the website. And is that same on Facebook? And is that the same on your Google business profile? Are you giving a clear, consistent message across the website? And then what links to that is what we call in the industry backlinks, which basically means other websites linking to yours, which you will gain over time. If you're writing lots of blogs, people will link to your blogs. For example, if you did the wedding venue blog, like we talked about, maybe the hotel you did a blog in would link to your blog. But also you can build some of those yourself. Get yourself on Yelp for free. Get yourself on other local directory sites for free. You've suddenly got websites linking to your website then. And the more you can do that, get yourself on a podcast and chat to them and they'll link to your website. There's another link. You can build links to some extent yourself. Now, you can pay people and they kind of do much more building, but you can start to build links yourself, because that's another thing Google does. It goes, how many people are linking to your website? Because if lots of people are, it must be because there's good stuff on there. Otherwise, why would people link to it?
Now, the thing about websites and just searchability in general, I always think is, the first half of this is to get people to move from, let's say, the Google search engine and click on your link and move to your website. But the second half of that problem is, so now that you're on your website, you actually want them to actually book you. So
that's it.
What are the specific things you got to look out for when you're thinking of designing or maybe remodeling your website that will actually entice people to take that final step and actually book you?
Okay. So the first one I think is not so much website as generic in terms of marketing, is I think you need to make sure the steps are small. So don't expect somebody to have seen 2 Facebook posts and book an £1,000 photo shoot. It ain't going to happen. So I think one of the things is plan your, some people call it a funnel, plan your, whatever it is, your journey from first getting a lead to them becoming a customer, and make it each little step as small as possible. So, where have they come from? What are you going to do next? To be honest, you're not going to get them to book an £1,000 photo shoot because they've been to your website once. So what is it you want them to do? Is it you've got a free download and that's enough for, you'll then obviously, once they've got the free download, there'll be other stuff that follows. But the key is, what is that next little thing you want them to do? Is it that you've got maybe a starter package that's really cheap? You go, okay, we could probably sell this, but it's maybe that they've met you loads of times and then they are going to go through the house. But you've got to think, so that's the first thing. Think about what you do want them to do. Come up with a plan. And for most photographers, to be honest, it's often set up a meeting or it's get a free download. It's something like that. You're unlikely to get them to go book now because there's usually a little bit further down the line. That's too big a jump. I think if they're working down that marketing funnel, it's got to be little step, or you're going to lose them. So then once you've thought about what you want them to do, the biggest thing is put that call to action all over your bloody website. Repeat. For 2 reasons. One is that people don't read your website like a book. So they don't read through and they're thinking, this guy's repeating himself. We used to, when we built websites, we originally used to give people a Word document of their website writing before we put it onto the website and say, what do you think? And they'd always say, you're just repeating your bloody self. Why am I paying you? But when they saw it on the website, it made perfect sense. So we gave up on doing that. They were quite happy a lot on the website. It makes sense because people don't read through, they jump. And the other thing is, even if they see the same thing repeated, they need to see it a few times before they're going to take the action. So yes, repeat what you want them to do. I think the site that I always quote on this is Grammarly. So we all know who Grammarly is, don't we? So if you go to Grammarly's website, Grammarly can do all sorts, but Grammarly used to, I think they might have made the website a bit bigger. They used to have a 1-page website. It used to say, Grammarly can help you with your emails, blah, blah, blah. Try Grammarly now. Grammarly can help you if you've got something to do. Try Grammarly now. Grammarly can help you. Try Grammarly now. And by the end, most people had pressed the button to try Grammarly now. And it's kind of the same on your website. What is it you want them to do? Yeah. Maybe you're a headshot photographer and you're thinking about helping people on LinkedIn. So it might be, get my free guide to improving your LinkedIn profile. They get that free guide. You've got their email address. You can talk to them. And also your free guide includes bloody sort your headshot out. Working on that way. But your website would then be, get my free guide to improving your LinkedIn profile, blah, 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 blah. Get my free guide to improving your LinkedIn profile, blah, blah, blah. You've got to repeat. I can't do now. And it's the only way to get people to do it. And maybe have a couple of call to actions on your website, but not many. Just one or two, and repeat if you want anyone to have a chance of actually clicking it.
Now, inevitably, this conversation will have to go to AI, clearly, and this is probably where a lot of people are just going to go, AI again. I'm going to switch off now. But, stay tuned, because one of the things I've come across recently is a discussion over AI as part of Google search. And the reason I mention that is because, Google search results, anybody who hasn't been living under a rock recently, over the last year or so, when you put anything into Google, on the top of your search result will be like an AI generated bit, essentially. And one of the things, one of the discussions I've come across is, whether that will have an impact especially on smaller businesses, because effectively, that's an AI answer, and if you're paying, let's say, for Google Ads,
their answer before they go to the website, haven't they?
Yeah, exactly right. And so does it? How do you get around that as a photographer, as a small business?
So there's a couple of sides to this. I don't think as a photographer it's that big a deal, because if you're looking for a professional photographer, I'm not looking for instructions on how to use my phone, which is what the AI would give a great answer to. I'm not looking for how do I get better shots with my SLR. I'm looking for, I want somebody to take wedding photographs in this area. And AI will help you with that. So in some ways, it's just like you want to be found on the Google search. You want to be found in the AI search. You want to be found when you say to Google, who is good at wedding photography in my area, you want to make sure that you are in there with what AI says. And that's back to, again, really good content on your website. What the AI doing is reading loads and loads and loads of websites and learning it all. And so if you've got tons of really clear copy about how great you are at wedding photography and what services you offer and so on, then you will start to appear in the AI search when people ask the right questions. So yeah, if your website has a blog which, is helping people how to do this, how to do that, then you definitely will get a lot less clicks through because AI will just say so. Although I did notice the other day, they're starting to credit their sources. Actually, I've done recipes last night and it was giving me a recipe, but crediting the sources so you could click through to it, which I did because I was like, I'm not sure about an AI recipe. There could be something dodgy missing here. Final stage, don't forget to bake it. But yeah, so I think for photographers, it's more an opportunity of making sure your content's really good on your website so that when people say, I want a really good headshot photographer in Manchester, that you're one of the ones that AI recommends. And that is just about really good content on your website.
And that's, of course, that just brings us to the other thing, is that I've noticed, especially over the last year and a half or something, whenever I'm looking for anything online, no matter whether it's a recipe or whatever it may be, I tend to now very often go to ChatGPT rather than to Google.
So yes, people, and it's just the same thing. It's about, being found either in that Google summary or, being the answer when you go to ChatGPT. Can you find me a brand photographer in Liverpool? Who do you recommend? And making sure you're in that list because your website has got plenty of content. It's talked plenty about Liverpool. It's talked a lot about brand photography. You've got a lot of blogs that are, hopefully maybe showing you a few venues. And, so there's enough content that ChatGPT and all the others have kind of gone, this is the top brand photographer in Liverpool. I'd better make sure they're in my answer when people ask about it.
So would you say the same rules still apply? So, for example, you
In some ways, yes. It's even more content focused. It's pretty much just so it's not so interested in your visitor numbers and stuff. It is more the content. If your website is 1 page or 2 page and 90% photographs, the AI is not going to know what you do and you're not going to include it. If you've got 10 pages, 4 services pages, and you've got quite a few pages about locations around, and you've got 50 blogs all about the relevant things, you're going to be there.
So that shift to using AI, or ChatGPT in particular, for search, as long as you look after the basic rules, as in like getting the content right on your website, it might not necessarily have that much of an impact. But when it comes
to because it's not it because that answer, if people are asking ChatGPT, they still want a photographer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's not that, like with my recipe, if I'm asking for a recipe for lemon meringue pie, it can give me a recipe and I don't go to the website that wants my traffic. Those sorts of websites are in much more difficulty. But if I want a photographer, ChatGPT can recommend me one, but it can't take my photos. I've still got to go to that photographer.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, what impact that will have on things like, Google advertising, for example, in the future. I'm wondering whether there's going to be a similar, I don't know, way of advertising in,
whether they will go with that. I mean, they want to make. It's difficult with Google to know where they land with this because they do want to make money, and them and Facebook are the biggest advertising agencies in the world, aren't they? But they also always put user experience first. So, for example, if you do ads that are terrible, so if you if you have an ad campaign where it's for certain words, but what you say in the ad doesn't match those words, and the landing page you send them to doesn't match those words, Google will not deliver your ad because Google wants users to have a good experience, even though you're paying them. They'll say, no, sorry, when people search for hedgehog, I want them to find a hedgehog. I don't want them to find an albatross because that's where you're at. That's what you're talking about. So Google will always prioritize that user experience. So it's whether they can find a way to, and I suspect they will, manage to kind of almost, yes, you can get sponsored within the AI almost. But it's not there at the moment, or whether they just stick with how it is at the moment that, it's just the ads at the top.
I feel like we should do a completely
space. I think with that one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's that sounds like a completely different episode at some point in the future for sure. We should probably dive into Google advertising in particular, maybe on a separate occasion as well. That'd be hilarious. Sam, it's been an absolute delight having you on the show. I've learned a lot. I've also learned a lot of things about my own website. I tell you what we should have done. Maybe we should do that some other time. We should have actually taken my website apart.
Just look at your website live on the...
Maybe we should do that. In fact, we should do that. Oh, I tell you what, I have an idea. Why don't we do that? This would be a fun thing. Why don't we do that as a live stream sometime?
Yeah, okay.
That could be a good idea, and you can completely and utterly trash my website. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show this week, and thank you so much for being the guest on this week's episode of the Camera Shake podcast.
It's been amazing being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay, folks, that is it for today. It was awesome having Sam on the show, a guaranteed deep dive into how photographers can use Google Maps, reviews, and websites to turn visibility into actual bookings. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll love. Check out episode 266, where we talk about how collaboration can transform your photography with Mark Hollis, packed with tips you can put into action right away. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake. It really does mean the world to us and helps us keep creating more exciting episodes. And again, I have no idea why I keep saying us. It's really just me. So anyhow, don't forget, head over to www.camerashakepodcast.com and sign up to the mailing list because we've got some incredible stuff coming up very soon. So you'll know about it first. For those of you listening to the audio version, did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? Well, just search for Camera Shake Podcast on YouTube and you can watch all past episodes over there. And if you're already on YouTube, make sure to drop us a comment, hit that like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the planet. Thank you for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday. So make sure you mark that in your calendars, diaries, I don't know, paper scrolls, whatever the heck you kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.